Yep.
You got a lot of guys competing for playing time at wide out. Have you seen any separation in that group yet?
Not yet. It's still a competitive group. There's some guys that are flashing each day, and some guys are improving their consistency. But to say there's a separation, not at this point. And this next back half of this week, going into next week, as we kind of put the finishing touches on camp, would be a good barometer for us to see where we are at that position group.
How much stock do you put on what the guys do in the scrimmages at the stadium?
Yeah, I put a lot of stock, right, because that's an opportunity in Scott Stadium. You know, coaches are off the field. You know, in practice, a lot of times coaches may try to help and correct the kid if you've seen him misaligned, or they may have a look like they're uncertain or something, and the coaches are out there helping them. And we try to really make sure we're not doing that. But when we get in the stadium, it's like a game. And this will be our second opportunity coming up next Saturday. Be like, kind of like our final prep, you know, going into NC State week.
How have your 12 and 13 personnel sets kind of developed through training camp?
You know, they're evolving, and what we've been doing is try to really evaluate all of our personnel. So whether we're in 3 receiver sets, you know, 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends, you know, and just seeing kind of how it comes together, who's being the most consistent and making plays for us consistently, right? Limiting missed assignments, right? So it's fun in that, right? We got some pieces to play with, and trying to just figure out exactly what's the best way for us to move the football.
Why did it work so well for you guys at times last year? I think like of the 5 touchdowns Sage caught, 4 came out of like 2 tight end sets. Why did it work so well for you guys?
Well, you know, those are tend to be heavy run sets, and you know, obviously we had some success last year with running the football. So a couple of those play actions out of those sets benefited Sage, and it all ties together, right? If we're able to run the football, then a lot of times it can create for tight ends to have the ability kind of in that intermediate area to find some space.
Talking about running the ball, Coach Gaither said that Novon's biggest challenge was himself coming into fall camp. What have you seen from him, and have you seen him take that next step?
I have, you know, in comparing him to previous seasons, you know, through 12 practices, this is the most steady and consistent he's been. You know, also benefits him that this is the healthiest he's been. You know, in previous training camps, he's missed a practice or 2 with something. He's been available every practice. So it's like we tell all these guys, right? You know, the best ability is availability. And when everybody's competing for their roles to help maximize us as an offense, then you can't make the club. As they say, you can't make the club in the tub. So, you know, his availability has allowed him to be more consistent and put forth what his abilities are.
And the same goes to Xavier Brown. He's been in full contact, I think, a few practices now. What have you seen from him, and what does he add to the offense when you see him out there?
I mean, old man X, he adds a lot to us, right? He's been doing it for, 4 years previous. You know, this will be his 5th season, and he's been a guy that can catch the ball for us out of the backfield. He's been a guy that's been able to create some explosive runs for us in the run game. And he's also been a guy that's been a pass protector. So to get him back going, you know, coming off his ACL, and just see how his confidence is steadily growing each day. You know, every time he gets bumped and thumped and realize, okay, this okay, I can protect myself. So I think he's getting that rust off and kind of getting back into form.
And just with the running back room so deep, how does that help Xavier Brown? Where, you know, before he was probably a guy who's getting a lot more snaps than you maybe wanted.
Yeah, I mean, we need them all, because that group gets a hit every play, and no different in practice. So, knock on wood, you know, but it's going to happen. Somebody's going to get nicked up. And to have Xavier's experience in the room and his experience as a player, but also with him having other guys to kind of help manage the load with him, especially coming into the season as we try to get him really back into it. Because there's going to be another mental hurdle for all those guys. Like, you come off of ACL, practice is one thing, right? Getting into a game, that's why going back to your question about the scrimmages on Saturday and trying to get him exposed in that type of environment so that he can get over those hurdles mentally, you know, even physically coming back from his ACL.
Keith said the other day that you've been experimenting a little bit with 2 backs in the backfield at the same time. Is that just another way to maybe get more guys into some action?
Yeah, you know, again, like I say, it goes back to evaluating all the personnel. And, with that group, you got 6 or 7 guys, and, you look at practice and 5 or 6 of them on the sideline at one time, right? And then, some of the receivers, we may have a guy out this day, right? Well, can somebody go in there and fill the void to help us get ourselves through practices? And then you try to see what guys can do skill-wise, whether it's, 2 tight ends, 2 backs or 3 receivers. We know we're going to play with 5 linemen and a quarterback, right? So that makes up 6, right? Where them other guys going to come from? So, and like I said, in this new climate, kind of per se of college football and how we built the roster, we feel like we got some variety of pieces to kind of put together. So that's the exciting part about it.
And as far as Bo is concerned, what were your goals in training camp to try to elevate his game?
Yeah.
To make him as good as he can be this year?
Yeah, so I think Bo, just through his work in the offseason, post-spring practice, mentally has a really good grasp of what we're trying to accomplish offensively. It's well documented his ability with his legs, and it's also documented that he's been able to throw the football. And where we aspire to go, right, as a program, we talk to our kids all the time, you got to run to win, right, but you got to be able to throw to score, right? And we can't be one-dimensional. And, whether it's drop back pass, play action pass, sprint out, whatever it is, as we diversify ourselves from a passing game standpoint, is feeling what is Bo executing very well, right? Defensively out there, we see every defense known to mankind, every coverage known to mankind. So, for him, from that standpoint, he will be prepared, as far as assessing a defense based on what we have conceptually, designed in that game because of what he sees in practice. And I think he's handled that pretty well. I think he's improving with his pocket presence, because naturally guys who have had success running, first thing they want to default to maybe is escaping the pocket, right? And we're not asking him to sit there and just hang in the pocket, but let's go through that progression and use your legs as an outlet, right? If your outlet's not there, then use your legs to escape. But we got to continue to try to, one, build confidence in the pocket, right? And then also continue to build a camaraderie amongst him and the wide receivers because they haven't played a game with him, right? He hasn't played a game with them. So, and that's what the fun part of and the exciting part and the competitive part of training camp for us this year is trying to put those guys in as many of those game-like, stressful, situations to get an evaluation of it, and how can we coach them through it to prepare them for, the season.
Can Tyler Coleman help you guys this
Yeah.
season? Is he having a good training camp?
He is having a good training camp. He's another guy kind of like Noah Vaughn, right? Again, if I can knock on some wood up here, he's been available every day, unlike in the past where he may have missed a day or two of practice, some of the inconsistencies with some soft tissue or things of that nature. So credit to him that he's put in the work, right, throughout the whole offseason to get his body in a position where he's not, having to encounter any of those instances thus far. And he's maximizing his opportunities, right? There's still growth. I mean, there's still growth in all of us. Hell, there's still growth in me as a coach, right? So we're all kind of growing together throughout this fall camp to make sure we're in the best position we can be, going into the season.
Just at this point in fall camp, what are maybe some areas where you think about where you're like, okay, I'm in a good spot, or
Yeah.
we're in a good spot as an offense of this point in fall camp, or maybe some areas where you're like, okay, we need to put more focus on this specific area?
That's good. I don't know if I ever say we're in a good spot, per se, because there's always room for growth. But to kind of give you somewhat of an answer, when I look at each position group, right, and those 5 guys that are our starters, right, seeing them really challenge themselves of not having the mindset of getting through practice, but dominating the practice, right? And and that camaraderie there, right? Being the tip of the spear, not to steal that from Coach Harbaugh, but in all seriousness, right? You look at the tight end room and, does the tight ends really, as we say, become the core of the offense, right? Nobody wants to work on their core. They got to be the glue that kind of holds this thing together, from our tight end room. And that was evident, in last year when we lost Dak and kind of how that impacted some of the things. And we feel like we have some good depth there in that room, right, to go with that. We've already talked about the receivers. We've already talked about the running back. So collectively, if all the parts kind of forming together, that's going to make me feel really good about where we are. Through practice 12, are we in a good spot? I think we are in a good spot. Do we still need to make some strides? Absolutely, we still need to make some strides. And I think we have a group of young men that understand that and are going to work towards that as well.
Does the 5-for-5 rule change anything for you if you have a freshman that's ready to get out there and play? Is there any?
No, because in our time here, we've played a lot of freshmen beforehand. Obviously we had to try to manage some of it with the 4-game ruling that they had in the past. So now it's really about everybody should believe they're going to play, and it's about them really showing us that they're not ready. Our mindset is that no matter what, because we tell them all the time, our depth is going to be our asset this year. Our competitive depth is going to be our asset, right? So no kid in this program, no young man in this program should feel like they don't have an opportunity to play.
Competitive depth, you ended up needing backup center last year. Drake
Yeah.
moved over. Who's working there? How does that
So
depth look?
we have some good quality guys we're evaluating there in that spot, from Grayson Reed to Noah Hotso to Ryan Brubaker and even Grant Ellinger. And then, we got the ace in our pocket, right? If God forbid it doesn't get to that point like it did in 2024, but Noah Josie, right? If hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but there's some unproven, right, depth there. But again, the challenges that we're facing in practice, not just challenges, but the competition of practice, right? They're having to go against blocking Anthony Britton and Jason Hammond and Henry Young, and here now that we got possibly got Goldie back, right? Goldie's a pretty good interior D lineman. So over these next 2 weeks, we could still see the growth of those guys. And I like where Grayson Reed as a freshman is really doing a good job of handling the circumstances of playing the center position, making the calls, right, straining, competing. Brubaker, right, Hartso. So they're giving us some confidence that we can rely on those guys as we get closer to the season.
And then how's Eli Holstein progressed through training camp?
Yeah, I tell you, Eli, transferring in, he had a heavy class load, so probably didn't see the true impact of him just because of the class load he had and a new offense. And then at the second half of the spring practice, you start to see him be a little more freer because the class load probably diminished a little bit on him. And then through the summer and, the conditioning piece of it, he's in better shape, right? He's moving around pretty good. He's throwing the ball really well. And, so to have him out there competing as well, with us, puts us in a pretty good situation, with the quarterbacks, along with Cole Gear as well. Those 3 guys getting the lion's share of the reps and kind of obviously encouraging each other, pushing each other, seeing things, trying to be, assistant to each other. So it's been fun to watch that and their interaction with Coach Lamb.
Bring Coach Rudd
Yep.
right in.
Thank you.